In this video, we're going to be taking a look at volume of rectangular prisms. Now I want you to turn your Go Math book to page 425, get out your math journal and a pencil. Now let's take a look at the essential question, which is how do you find the volume of a rectangular prism? So let's take a look at the Explore activity on page 425 titled Using Fractional Edge Lengths. So it says a cube with edge length 1 unit and volume 1 cubic unit is filled with smaller cubes as shown. So let's take a look at, first of all, for letter A, how many small cubes are there in this cube? So you can see this cube is made up of 3 different layers, a top, middle, and bottom. Now, the top layer has 9 cubes. So if the top layer has 9 cubes and there's 3 total layers, we could see that there are 27 total cubes. Now let's take a look at the question underneath that. It says, how does the combined volume of the small cube, 27 total, compare to the volume of the large cube, which is 1 unit? And we can see the volumes are equal. So 27 small cubes added together equals the 1 unit. Okay, so we'll write volumes. The volumes are equal. Now let's take a look at this multiplication problem that can be set up. It says the number of small cubes, 27, times what number volume of one small cube equals the volume of a large cube, which will be 1. So one small cube, if there's 27 total cubes, one small cube would be 1/27th of the total amount of cubes. So what is the what is the volume of one small cube? That would be 1/27th cubic units. So we can see 27 times 1/27th will equal 1. Now let's take a look at letter B. It says each edge is, of the large cube contains how many small cubes? Now let's take a look at the edge. And we can see, and the edge is right here. We can see there are a total of 1, 2, 3 small cubes in an edge. So 3 total small cubes. Now we can look at this multiplication problem. 3, the number of small cubes per edge is 3. Edge length of one small cube, we don't know that yet, will equal edge length of large cube. So 1 edge length of a large cube. So if there are 3 small cubes in an edge, that means 1 cube would represent 1/3 of that. So what is the edge length of one small cube? The edge length of one small cube is 1/3 units. Now from this, each small cube has an edge length, we can see, of 1/3. Okay, so we see that 1/3 small cube has an edge length. There's 3 cubes, so a total of 1/3 for one small cube. And the volume is 1/27th, if we're looking at the volume of it all. Okay, the edge length, 1/3 units. The volume, in other words, the total amount, that 1 cube now represents 1/27th. It's 1/3 because the edge only has 3 cubes, 1/27th because the whole unit has 27. Now the formula for volume of a cube with edge length L is V equals L times L times L, or you can see in letter D, V equals L to the 3rd. So knowing that, we can look at the edge and figure out 1/3 times 1/3 times 1/3. That's going to equal 1/27th of the whole entire unit. So we'd be able to figure out how many squares are, or how many cubes are in that whole entire unit, because 1 then would equal 1/27th of the whole unit. Okay, now taking that cube from the Explore activity on page 425, let's take a look at page 427. It says several of the small cubes in the Explore activity are arranged into a medium-sized cube as shown. So we're just taking a look at this medium-sized cube, but remember the whole unit would be the cube that we saw on page 425. It says show two different ways to find the volume of this cube. Okay, so what we can see, a couple different things, a couple different answers that we can write down, and I want you to write this down too. The first way, 8 small cubes each have a volume of 1/27. In other words, remember the total unit that we see on page 425 is 27 total cubes equal to 1 unit. So we have 8 small cubes have a volume each of 1/27 of the total. So what we can do is we can take these 8 total cubes, multiply that by 1/27. So this cube represents 8/27 of the total unit that we can see on page 425. Why 8/27? Because there are 8 cubes in this smaller cube and 27 total from the larger cube. Now another thing that we can figure out, another way of doing this, is that each small cube has an edge length 1/3. If you remember that from the previous shape, edge length of 1/3. And there are 2 small cubes along each edge length. The edge length of the medium-sized cube is 2 times 1/3. We can see that. So 2 times 1/3. Why is it 2 times 1/3? Because there are 2 cubes per edge. That's going to equal 2/3 for the edge compared to the total amount. Okay, so 2 out of the 3. And its volume, we know, is 2 times 3. Sorry, 2/3 times 2/3 times 2/3 is going to equal 8/27. Now let's take a look at finding volume. Now a rectangular prism has 6 faces. It's important to understand that. Any pair of opposite faces can be called the bases of the prism. Now volume of a rectangular prism, a couple different formulas. Volume equals length times width times height, or volume equals base times height. So in other words, where B represents the area of the prism's base, the length times the width. In other words, sometimes you'll already be given the area, the L times the W, or length, width, and width have already been multiplied together. So that kind of eliminates a step for you, and then you just multiply that by the height. So let's take a look at a couple problems on this. So we can see for number 2 on page 427, and this is how I want you to write it out. So volume equals length times width times height. Now from here what we're going to do is we're going to plug in our numbers. Volume equals length 7.5 times the width 4 times the height, which would be 2.5. Now from here we're going to multiply the 7.5 times 4. So 7.5 times 4 is going to give us 30. Then we still have 30 times 2.5. Now we're going to multiply volume equals 30 times 2.5. And we'll get 75. Now when we're dealing with volume, it's going to be in cubic units. So it's going to be 75 cubic inches. So inches, and then that 3 represents cubic inches. In other words, length, width, and height. So that's how you find volume. Volume equals length times width times height. Now let's say, for example, number 2, they already gave you the base. Okay, so in other words, they already gave you that base of 7.5 times 4 equaling 30. Okay, let's say we already knew that. What we would do, volume would just equal base times height. In other words, volume would equal 30, because they already gave us the area of that base, times 2.5. You'd still multiply it. Volume equals 75 inches, or cubic inches. Okay, so same thing, they just gave you the area of that base, or same answer, I should say. Okay, let's take a look at number 4, and let's do this together. Now let's take a look at solving volume problem. It says when you have a real-world problem involving the volume of a prism, you can choose to use either of the volume formulas you know. So you can either choose to use volume equals length times width times height, or volume equals base times height. Either one will get you the same answer. Now let's take a look at number 4 at the bottom. And what we can do is we have a rectangular, what we can do first of all is read the problem. That would be helpful. A rectangular swimming pool is 15 meters long, 10.5 meters wide, and 2.5 meters deep. What is its volume? Okay, so what we can do is we will write out the formula first. Volume equals length times width times height. Now, even though there's not necessarily a width and height, we can just understand that we have 3 different measurements, and we're going to plug those numbers in for these 3 different measurements. So now we're going to plug them in. Volume equals 15 times 10.5. Now the deep can represent the height, okay? So 2.5. Let's write this out together. You can do it in your math journal. Don't try to squeeze it in your math book like I am. I just have it over here for you. So now what we're going to do is we're going to multiply the length and the width together. So 15 times 10 is going to give us 157 and 1/2. So 15 times 10 will give us 157 and 1/2. We're going to still need to multiply that by 2 and 1/2. Now we multiply 157 and 1/2 times 2 and 1/2. That's going to give us 393 and 3/4 meters cubed. And that would be our answer there. So volume, length times width times height. You can see you just plug in the numbers within your formula and you can find the volume of that rectangular swimming pool. Now what I would like you to do is work on number 3, and when you're finished you can press play and I'll have the answer for you. So I'd like you to pause the video now. Okay, you can see the answer for number 3 is 160 cubic meters. Now what I would like you to do is work on number 5, and you can work on this now. Now for number 5 we have 277 and 5/10 cubic feet. Now what I would like you to do is work on number 7, and you can work on that now. Now for number 7 we have 357 cubic inches for the answer. And let's wrap up the video with the essential question check-in. It says, which 2 formulas can you use to find the volume of a rectangular prism? Why are these 2 formulas equivalent? And we have volume equals length times width times height, and volume equals base times height. The area of the base, B, is really length times width, and since both B and length times width are multiplied by height, the 2 are equivalent. So this concludes the video on volume of rectangular prisms. If you have any questions about this concept, please come and see me.